You're Lee Everett. You're a professor at Athens who killed a state senator who was sleeping with your wife. This is your parents' store. Folks around town know the owner's son got himself a life sentence, but I'm a reporter for WABE in Atlanta. I paid attention to that trial. Maybe you're a murderer, but I don't really care. Frankly, that's a skill that might come in handy.
Lee Everett is one of gaming's most masterfully written protagonists, and arguably one of the greatest fictional characters in all of entertainment. A true representation of humanity, shaped by choices that impact not only himself, but those he loves and protects. It's finally time to explore one of the most iconic characters in gaming history, the man who brought a generation of people to tears. A character brought to life by the unforgettable voice of Dave Fennoy, and supported by a team of storytellers who crafted one of the most emotional, life-changing journeys ever told. To understand who Lee Everett becomes, we first need to understand the man he was. Raised in Macon, Georgia in 1966, Lee came from a family who owned a local drugstore. But rather than inherit the family business, he forged his own path, becoming a history professor at the University of Georgia in Athens. At some point, he married, though his wife's frequent work travel left Lee alone for long stretches. His life all came crashing down when Lee discovered she was having an affair with a United States senator. In a moment of rage, Lee killed the man. Whether it was truly intentional remained unclear. Lee himself claimed it was an accident. Regardless, the consequences were irreversible. His family disowned him, and he was convicted of murder. That's where The Walking Dead begins, with Lee in the back of a police car, en route to Meriwether County Correctional Facility. It's not just the end of his freedom, it's the end of his old life entirely. But what makes this backstory so crucial? Because right from the start, Lee is framed as an everyman. He's not a hero, not a villain, just a man with raw human emotions, passions, and flaws. And that's exactly what makes him compelling. As a protagonist, Lee can make decisions, and will, whether guided by emotion or reason. He's educated, thoughtful, and reactive in believable ways. He's not some stoic archetype, he's a man who truly feels. The second key point is that Lee's introduction isn't just there to set up a redemption arc. The game begins at Lee's absolute lowest. No ties, no obligations, no freedom. That emptiness gives the player a blank canvas, a character who narratively makes sense to take over. It's a rare alignment of story and gameplay. We're not just given control, we're given permission. The Lee you become is only possible because of the Lee we're given. Someone grounded, ordinary, and entirely human. And with the emotional nuance brought to life by Dave Fennoy's performance, we're drawn into Lee's world effortlessly. It doesn't feel like we're playing him, it feels like we are him. And now that we know who Lee is, and how the game sets the stage for us to step into his shoes, it's time to explore what that actually means. Taking on the role of protector, surviving in a broken world, and ending his journey the same way it began, being judged. The first episode of The Walking Dead is meant to show us the beginning of the end, the collapse of society, safety, and freedom. But for Lee, that day had already come. His world ended the moment he was convicted. In fact, the apocalypse may be the only scenario where Lee is offered a second chance. A world where the rules are broken just enough for him to write a new ending. Instead of rotting living in a cell, he's given purpose. And nothing tests a man's character more than becoming responsible for the life of an innocent child. Clementine is Fate's answer to Lee's unspoken questions. Is it too late? Can I make things right? He always wanted a family, and now the universe offers not punishment but redemption. From that moment on, he walks not as a convict but as a guardian, with no one left to live for but her. The first episode challenges Lee from the outset. Herschel is a soft echo of societal judgment, a foreshadowing of harsher moral arbiters like Vernon and the Stranger. Kenny is a mirror, a man driven by love for his family, yet paralysed in moments that require action. Sean teaches Lee that hesitation costs lives, a lesson tragically repeated with Duck. Kutcher represents the danger of clinging to denial in a world that demands change. This pattern of mirrors and trials continues into the drugstore, where Lily and Larry represent fractured leadership and clouded judgment. People broken by fear, pride, or grief. But perhaps the most pivotal figure for Lee's growth in episode 1 is Carly. By revealing she knows who he is, she forces Lee to confront a truth. The world may have ended, but that doesn't mean he's been forgiven. Inside his parents' store, Lee is brought face to face with the life he left behind. Yet the game makes one thing clear: you can't move forward by erasing the past. You must accept who you were to protect who you're becoming. That message crystallizes when Lee is forced to kill his own brother, a moment demanding both survival and symbolic severance. He may have escaped prison, but without choosing atonement, he'll remain trapped, not by bars, but by himself. By the end of episode 1, you've already begun shaping the kind of Lee you're going to become. You've answered key moral questions without being told you were taking a test. Are you honest, even when the truth could hurt you? Do you protect innocence over utility? Do you confront threats to your group, even if it creates deeper rifts? These choices are compelling because they emerge naturally from Lee's character. His past, his tone, his writing all allow for moral ambiguity, and the brilliance of it, every answer feels valid. That's why episode 2 becomes the moment where your Lee is truly defined. You're thrown into chaos, caught between a bitter old man and his unstable daughter, navigating infighting, starvation, and eventually cannibals. At this point, neutrality is no longer an option. Even letting a man unknowingly eat human flesh is framed as understandable. But this is where Lee's role as a protector is tested like never before. When you're given the chance to kill one of the cannibals, Danny St. John, it's done in isolation. Just you and the monster. Or so it seems. Then comes the gut punch. Clementine is watching. That private moment becomes a defining one. Do you show mercy, clinging to the last scraps of your old humanity? Or do you execute him, showing your Lee has abandoned the rules of the past? Either path fits, because both are true to who Lee could be. One overlooked aspect of Lee's arc ties back to Carly. Before we step into his shoes, all we know is that Lee murdered a man, presumably in jealous rage. That detail, left behind in episode 1, returns in episode 3, but with a twist. This time, Lee becomes the victim of that same impulsive violence. Lily, overcome by paranoia and rage, murders Carly in front of him. It's the universe's cruel way of balancing the scales. What makes it sting even more is the timing. Just before this happens, the group learns Lee is a killer. Then Carly dies, Duck is bitten, and Kenny begins his descent. This domino effect isn't accidental, it's a return to Lee's original arc. Despite everything he's done to redeem himself, he's still haunted. And now, with the threat of losing Clementine looming, Lee must face it all. Lee is repeatedly confronted by characters who represent judgment. One of the most important is Chuck, a quiet drifter who sees the pattern and warns Clementine will die under Lee's care, not out of malice, but experience. Chuck judges Lee on what kind of teacher he is, on how well he prepares Clementine for the world ahead. His warning is blunt: if Lee fails to teach her, she will die. If Lee takes this to heart and begins to change, future voices of judgment like Vernon and the Stranger begin to lose weight. Their criticisms feel less like truth and more like projection, because by that point, Lee isn't just surviving with Clementine, he's transforming as a person. And that transformation shifts the story's focus from who Lee was to who he chooses to become. It's around this stage that it becomes clear. Lee needs a final judge, and deep down, he knows he won't survive the apocalypse. He's not willing to lose Clementine, and he's not willing to lie to himself either. Watching Kenny spiral confirms what Lee has already begun to accept. All of this is borrowed time, and when that time runs out, he can't choose to run from it. And if you still have doubts, the game confirms this almost immediately. The Stranger has been speaking to Clementine behind Lee's back, silently waiting for the group to reach Savannah. Lee is literally journeying toward the final man who will convict him, the one who stands in for the world after it's ended. Before the final reckoning, Lee is confronted by two more characters who reveal the kind of man he's becoming: Ben and Vernon. Ben is more of a vehicle for Kenny's arc than Lee's, but he still holds significance. He reveals how you treat vulnerable, well-meaning young people when you're not fully responsible for them. It's easy to protect Clementine. She's innocent and bonded to Lee, but Ben is anxious, unstable, and makes real mistakes. How you treat him says something deeper. Are you caring for Clementine because you're good, or because it feels right? This moral test leads into the arrival of the third societal judge, Vernon. If Herschel judged Lee's honesty and Chuck judged his ability to teach, then Vernon judges his capacity to care. He assesses what Lee emotionally provides for Clementine, not just protection, but stability, trust, and guidance. Crucially, he's the first to say what others only imply: that he might be a better guardian for her than Lee. It's through these tests that we reach the beginning of the end. Lee is bitten, Clementine goes missing, and the first thing Lee is tasked with is honesty. Do you reveal your bite? The Lee we've become is now faced with what everyone said would happen, and using the lessons you've learned, you're tasked with getting Clementine back. It's here that the moments you don't control Lee shine through. Whether the player likes it or not, Lee takes control of his fate, walking through the horde, fighting to the death. This is the part you don't get a say in, because Lee is rewriting the ending he was given, similar to Kenny's sacrifice. Instead of dying in cuffs as a criminal, he'll die in cuffs as a hero. The Stranger is every judge Lee's ever had rolled into one. He's the embodiment of your past catching up. With a gun pointed at you, the question is, what has your Lee become? This is his moment. You can express regret, you can be honest about your choices, and you can fight to prove that, despite everything, Lee was the right person for Clementine. In the end, Lee always defeats the Stranger, whether by suffocating him or through Clementine pulling the trigger. But a physical victory isn't the same as a moral one. If the Stranger was right, if you really were a monster, monster, then you die as a man who never changed. It's through those quiet questions and personal moments with Lee that we begin to truly connect with him. Now, with his fate sealed and Lee handcuffed one final time, only one question remains. Did you rewrite his story? The full impact of Lee Everett's story is something I could never fully capture, but I do believe it marked a turning point in gaming. Lee redefined what an everyman protagonist could be. He wasn't voiceless, bland, or passive. He was layered. Human, a history professor, an ordinary man on the surface, but within that ordinary shell was someone capable of profound change, someone who could become a hero not through strength or dominance, but through empathy, care, and love for someone he had no obligation to protect. Despite being guilty of one of the most damning crimes imaginable, Lee proves that a man's story isn't set in stone. Whether or not you believe he can be forgiven for taking a life is your decision, but what Telltale's The Walking Dead shows undeniably is that judgment doesn't always tell the whole story. Sometimes the human spirit pushes back against shame, against the past, and even against the world's prejudice. A character doesn't need to begin as a hero to become one, nor does a villain need to stay a villain. In the end, what makes Lee's story so powerful is his unwavering resolve to use his second chance, not for himself, but to make something right, to protect a child, to pass something good on. To end his life not defined by what he was, but what he chose to be. While I typically steer clear of identity topics, not out of fear but because I try to accept characters as they are, it would feel unjust to ignore something significant about Lee's character. He isn't just a rare African American lead in gaming, but one who enters the story already condemned by society. Yes, Lee openly admits his guilt. His conviction was warranted. But The Walking Dead challenges us to see beyond that. It shows that even those the world has written off can still be good, can still protect, teach, and rise above the circumstances they've been placed in. All of these elements combine to form a character who's not just deeply human, but quietly boundary breaking. If I had to leave you with one final thought, it's this. Lee Everett is a character who unapologetically embodies the human condition, a man who acted out of emotion and paid the price, but used the time he had left to carve out something meaningful. He didn't just survive, he protected, taught, and left behind a legacy in the form of a brave, capable little girl. He's a reminder that even when life feels like it's over, you're still the one writing the ending. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please feel free to subscribe. It means a lot.